Welcome to the Open Mic Podcast Show with Mike Midgley.
Hey, and welcome to the Open Mic Podcast. On today's episode, I'm excited to be covering the topic of networking and the power of personal relationships. Now, anybody in business knows the values in the network, not necessarily in the skills or the products. That's my take anyway. I'm always open to be shot down or debated on that, and you can use the hashtag throughout the show using the hashtag #TheOpenMic. Today's influencer guest is Nate Peo. Nate is based in Upland in California. Welcome to the show, Nate. How are you doing today?
I'm doing great. Thanks for having me on.
No, it's an absolute pleasure. And a big shout out to Nate because it's 5:30 over there in the States when we're recording this, and that's one hell of a commitment. So we're very, very appreciative of you.
Just wiping the sand out of my eyes.
Absolutely, from that side. So if you want to learn a little bit more about Nate and what he does, you can head over to natepeo.com. That's NATEPEO.com. We will put that link in the show notes as well as the app, so you can go and check it out there. And also, a part of what this show is about is networking, building relationships. If you want to get Nate into your professional network, I would certainly recommend that you do that. Head over to linkedin.com/IN/Nate Peo. Shoot Nate up and get him a connection request in, and join his network and see the content he puts out there. So let's learn a little bit about you, Nate. Obviously, construction has played a big part of your life.
Yes, it has.
And in that journey. Obviously I've worked with the construction sector myself, not actually in the trade, but as a supporting mechanism and supply chain to it. And I know that there's some highs and lows, especially in financial crises and currently with the horrendous pandemic that we've got going off around the world at the moment. So just tell us a little bit about your backstory, your journey, your highs and lows of construction, and how that's flowed to where you are today.
Okay, well, I got started really in college. I was going to school for architecture, and it turns out I wasn't artistic enough to be an architect. So I quickly switched over to construction management classes, which was like a comparable program, and then picked up some jobs working construction in the summers to help pay the bills. And then when I graduated college, I went and started working for a company. I think that was a little bit of an eye-opener with the reason why you start needing to develop personal relationships. When I first started in the trades, I was doing the work myself. So they would just, he'd call you, hey, be at this job site, start working at this time. But as I started getting more involved in my career, I started moving more out of the trades and into the office. Yep. And that becomes a bit of negotiating contracts, working with vendors, working with suppliers, ordering materials, and your bosses and the owners of the company are like, hey, we need to get a good deal. We need to get the best price. We need to shop for this. We need to shop for that. Or you have something you need to build that you've never done before. So you have to find like maybe special people that can construct it with good skill base. So at the time, you're kind of building this network of relationships. You're maybe not realizing you're doing it because this is back in 2000. So like the internet really wasn't super big back then. So you'd have to dig up this thing they call the blue book and look through pages and call people's phone numbers. And then, if they had a nice ad or something like that, you'd start doing it. And over time, you start figuring out who was good, who was not good. And then you start realizing like, hey, these are the people that I trust to do my job. And over time, over like the 20 years of my career, I started realizing that as I was making these relationships, you realize you're building a team, you're building a tool chest of people you can rely on to get things done. And so once you start, your eyes become open to, hey, I can do my job better when I have a better supporting staff, supporting team members, which could be the people that work for you or the people that are vendors and trades and subcontractors. You start gathering those people in, and all of a sudden, hey, I'm doing better when I have better team members, because it's really, you're getting paid for results.
Yep.
And you want people that you can trust. So that's where I kind of started getting this idea in my head that relationships really, really do matter, especially in construction. It's not just banging hammers and nails.
Yeah, and it's quality focused as well, that industry, isn't it? Because it's not just about, yes, I've laid the bricks or put the foundation in. It's the quality of that, because it's substructure and ultimately from there. So it's not just the relationship, I suppose, to a degree. It's the relationship with a quality focus, which obviously extends into what we're doing now and building businesses and improving lifestyles, isn't it? And that quality is far better than quantity, I suppose.
It really is. And anybody that's done like a home remodel could tell you like the horror stories of working with a bad contractor. And where do you usually turn to get a good contractor? Like you turn to your friends and family, like, hey, who can you refer to me to do this? Yeah. Because you just don't trust calling out of the phone book. And it's really, it just is such a word of mouth industry, even though it's always like about 10 years behind in technology. So this idea of like, hey, I'm going to go on Yelp and find somebody to come do some work for me is not always the easiest place to go search. And it really is word of mouth advertising.
Yeah. So what would you say the biggest high is and the biggest lesson that you learned as a low, whether that was a mistake or failure? Because, my view on life, Nate, is that there's no failures, there's just lessons learned. And, you go from there. So tell us some of the highs, lows. I'm not at the financial crisis, and 08, 9, 10 was a bit of a low point. But, tell us certainly because our audience is built up of a wide range of entrepreneurs, and we try and bridge the gap to give them ideas to implementation and things like that. And it's always important to know that the successful people who are out there at the moment, I've interviewed people all over the world for the last 4 years, and I have never, ever met one successful person who hasn't failed, crashed, burned, and rebounded off the wall or something. You know what I mean? And they just seem to be prepared for success once they've hit that wall. And I'd just love for you to share some of those stories with the audience. That'd be awesome.
Well, the first company I worked for used to have this saying that like you didn't really learn as much on the jobs that went good as you did on the jobs that went bad. When projects were going really successful and they were profitable, like you were like, yeah, high five, I did such a great job. But a lot of it just tended to be the circumstances, and you didn't really get the lessons learned were covered up, and not intentionally, but just because like the project was successful, you didn't realize like the things you could have done better because it turned out good. But when stuff hit the fan and they were really poor projects and they were really financially struggling, you started becoming, with a lack of resources, lack of, skills and stuff like that, you start being, hey, I got to do more. I got to find solutions, and your creativity starts jamming, and you have to get a lot more effort to put in just to kind of like barely get through the finish line. And so those challenging projects are the more you learn so much more from the hard lessons. You're right on that. So I think most of those lessons, when I boil those back down to why did those projects go sideways, I think they usually had a sense of they just started off maybe on the wrong foot. We didn't put the focus and the effort into the upfront planning. And we also had another say, it's called the first pour. And the way it worked is if you're pouring concrete, you never want to, once you pour concrete, like if it's got to be fixed, it's get the jackhammers out. It's a big deal. But if
it's wasted
beforehand, you can correct it and not have this giant problem. So we'd say the first pour is you go out there. If say the estimate tells you need 5 guys to do this project, you'd bring 10 out, and you'd bring 10 out because like, hey, I'm going to just make sure this first one goes so perfectly well that the rest of the project will be off on the right foot. And then a few times, like people would be like, we don't really need to do that. We didn't put the proper effort. We just think everything's going to turn out. And then the project starts off just slightly bad. And then it starts steamrolling and gets really, really downhill. And you go, where did it really all go wrong? And it's like, maybe it's not just the first pour that was, but I think it's setting the intention of, hey, let's overplan. Let's really overthink about what could go wrong and plan for the worst, hope for the best. And then then the project seems to take off and be stronger. So I think when you start having that mindset with everything you do, your likelihood for success seems to improve. And once you're off to building that momentum, you're more likely to see success. So as for the highs, I think when I really came into finding my voice with how it relates to negotiating contracts and dealing with subcontractors and vendors and essentially networking in the industry is, I grew up in this era where it was like you pick up the phone and you yell at people and you slam up the phone and you treat them like crap, and hopefully they'll grind them down and they'll give you a good price on the deal. And I was just like, hey, this isn't something I'm like. I'm not like this person, this real jerk and asshole and an intimidation through fear. So I was a little bit nervous, like how I figured that out. Once I kind of discovered like, hey, it's a fun game. It's a back and forth. It's like a little chess match.
Yeah. You expect that, don't you? There's a bit of gamesmanship and brinksmanship going on.
It's like a banter, and it's a fun challenge with friends. And over time, these people you're dealing with on a daily basis, regular basis, they become your friends because you've been doing business with them for so long that it just becomes excitement. So then when I started, hey, I found my voice, I found my way of doing business, then I started really finding success when I was able to help my vendor friends out. I'd be like, oh, you need an introduction to this other company. Let me help you do this.
Yeah.
And that's where I think I started feeling a lot more fulfillment, when it wasn't just about myself, but it was about how I was helping others chase their success goals and what they needed to do to be in business. So.
Yeah, that's a great point. And I love the statement. If I can take you back to the failure parts or the wrong parts, not for anything, but it's how you were saying you start with that intent to sort of be successful, over deliver or over plan. And that's no different in business. You know, if you got on a capital raise, you got an IPO, you enter in a new market, nobody's, you could be seriously lucky, but if you skim it and you try and shortcut it, you've got to get, usually the wrong end of it. And I love that statement about starting with that intent to be successful, because it breeds confidence, doesn't it, Nate? And,
yes.
And you can then those little milestones. Yeah, that went well. And, maybe we didn't need those guys, but they were there, and that the success overrides that. And then you sort of build and move forward. So I love that. So I'm going to bring you to the point now, and I know on your website and your culture now is you get Enough is Enough and the All In podcast, which if you've not checked out Nate's podcast, go over and check it out. All In podcast. You can get that at natepeo.com and obviously on the major channels. But there's this Enough is Enough thing. Talk to us about that point when you sort of reach it, and then how you've transferred that into the podcast.
So I say enough is enough is for me, looking at me internally and what I've been afraid to do with my career or my goals or whatever it is I've been chasing.
Yep.
And I look back on a lot of times I've said, hey, I wanted to do something bigger than I've currently been doing. I wanted to have a bigger impact. And so I'd start doing things like post a little bit on social media, do a little bit of this. And I think to myself, ooh, I probably should have done that. Like, I need to pull that back. Like, I'm defined as a business person in construction that does purchasing. So what am I talking about? Motivation or goals or impact or any of this other stuff? So I got to pull that back. And then a few years would pass and be like, man, I really wish I had stuck with it, because like I watched some other people kind of in the same starting places I did. They just were consistent with it.
Yeah.
And they were able to develop this big platform, and they were able to launch off and do more than I was. So I always kept looking back going, man, I wish I just kind of would have stuck with it. I wouldn't have let my fear, my doubts hold me back and saying, hey, don't do that. You don't need to do that. There's no reason for you to do that. And so this year, or relatively the last 6 months, I said, that's it. I'm not doing that anymore. I'm going to do these things that I've wanted to do.
Love it.
And it requires some vulnerability. It requires putting yourself out there and letting it be known that you're this person, because everybody's unique. Everybody has their own interests, skills, and set. That's also not just what they're defined and known for in their career. So if you want to do big things, you're going to have to put yourself out there. Yep. And you just have to get over it. Everybody had a starting point of day one. So why not you, or why not me? So that was when I just said, enough is enough. I'm going to do it. I know it's going to be uncomfortable. And I've posted stuff on social media and said, ooh, I got to take that down. But I just go, nope, you're doing this for a year solid, and you're going to show it's not going to kill you. It's not going to hurt you. You're going to go, whenever you've put yourself out there and been more vulnerable and connected with more people, you've always seen a success. You've always seen your network of people grow, and the people that you can offer value to, or they offer value to you, or you can connect within your connections, always grows. All the ships rise with the tide. So I'm just like, I'm doing that. I'm just going to stay out of my way. And even if I feel uncomfortable about it, I'm just going to put it up there and leave it up there and just deal with it and realize it's not going to hurt me. It's not going to kill me, but it's going to be a wild journey, and we don't know where it's going to go, but it's definitely going to go somewhere that's going to be fun and exciting.
No, it's great. And I echo that. And I think from my side, just to sort of support you on that, Nate, is we started the Open Mic podcast, and the first 10 episodes, they absolutely suck. We didn't have the show format right. We didn't have the recording right. We didn't have the process right. But look, and one of the things I said is, right, we're going to take the first 10 episodes down, and we're going to start 11 as episode 1. And then my team went, no, that shows how far we've come, and we produced. And of course, we're here 4 years later. I think we're, season 5, we're nearly at the end of season 5, ready to start season 6 now, just as we're going to the spring 2020. And, obviously, whilst we're still learning, we're improving the show technique and the way we interact and support and promote guests. We're nowhere near than what we were. And I'm so glad that my team, because I didn't necessarily do it because of fear. career or anything, but I just did it that, oh yeah, I was a bit embarrassed about how the first 10 episodes went, so let's just wipe them and start over. But I think you've got to have that courage to leave that out there and say, look, if you got some value out on, awesome. If you think there's no worries, this is where we are today. And there's a great saying out here by a UK pop artist called Ian Brown, and he says, it's not where you're from, it's where you're at. And and that's exactly now we as a show, what you're doing with the All In podcast, it's where you're at now and wherever you've been with learning and going forward. And I class my podcast as a public service solution, to introduce people like yourself and influencers and guests to my audience to help them and just tap into that conversation. And so I agree with you, keep it up there and move forward.
I love that you're doing that, because it's really showing people that starting point that, like, you don't have to have this polished big $1 million marketing budget to get going. You have, everybody start somewhere. And if you want to start somewhere, hey, just grind it out like everybody else did, and you're going to get better. You're going to improve. So I think it's important for that.
No, that's excellent. So talk to me about super connectors. I love that. When I did the research on your bio, it says here, my goal is to present authentic experiences from my own life, along with thought-provoking yet practical advice. As a super connector, I'm passionate about bringing people together. I love that. Tell us a little bit more about that, Nate.
So for me, a super connector is not somebody that goes out and collects 1 million business cards and they know a bunch of stuff. They're the person that, like, if you call and you say, hey, who do we know that I could get a cake from delivered on Tuesday on short notice? That's the person you're going to call. Who can we call to? Who knows somebody over at this one company that we could get a foot in the door? We're going to call Nate. So to me, a super connector is not so much somebody that just knows everybody, but they have this network of really important, I guess, rainmakers that they know. So if somebody comes to say, I need help with XYZ, you pull out your Rolodex, say, I'm going to get you connected with this other person that's going to make a huge difference from you. And not only can they make the connection, but they can make the phone call. The call's picked up and the person on the other end says, hey, if you think that person's important for me to meet, I don't need anything else, send them my way. Like,
it's a trust thing as well, isn't it?
No questions asked. And then they trust that you're going to send good people their way, and they're going to send good people your way. And so there's just, like you said, just this level of trust that you're making good connections with people that are making positive impacts in each other's lives. It's not so much about what's funneling through me, but it's really where I can, move people and connect people to other things that have big impacts in their lives.
Yeah, no, I love it. That and what I'd love you to do as well, guys, as listeners of the show, if you want to use the hashtag the open mic, leave me a name of a super connector and how they've helped you. Give them a shout out, and say, hey, thank you. These guys helped me out. These girls helped me out. Whatever it would be, it's not weak to show appreciation. It's not weak to do anything, and there's no fear about it. Let's do a Hall of Fame, if you want to call it that. Let's help and give these guys a shout out, because if they've helped you, give them a thank you. And if they're maybe not super connectors, but somebody who has just really helped you along your way, got you out of that jam, give them a shout out and make the day. They'll appreciate it. So one thing I wanted to mention around your bio, Nate, is that I know you earned an MBA from Pepperdine Uni. And today there's a lot of networkers, influencers, call them what you wish, saying, hey, you don't need to go to uni, go out there and be an entrepreneur and this, that, and the other. And I'm just wondering, with your new mission, what you're on now, what's important to you. I know you're saying yes to a lot more things and things like that from what I see. Is the MBA relevant for people wanting to go out and be in the modern 21st century these days? How much has it helped you? Was it essential? And if somebody's thinking about going down that path, what's your advice? Do you think it's a go, or is it unique to their circumstance?
I do think it's unique to your circumstances. I always tell people there's two things that make you invaluable to an organization or a company or business that you're doing, is your experience and your network. Both of them take time to develop, and you can't get them overnight. And by experience, part of experience is your education. That's something that can't be taken away. You're always going to have that. So for me, if I told somebody like, hey, should I go get my MBA? I always ask them, what's your career path? What's your business that you're into? Because if you want to go become a financial banker, you better have an MBA, and it better be from a good school. Like, it matters. In my industry, construction, it's 50-50 because there's people that are division presidents of home building companies that have master's degrees and PhDs. And then there's another guy that barely graduated high school that came up through the trades as a framing carpenter. Like there's a bit of both. So it really just depends on what your goals, what your career ambitions are. But at the same time, whatever education you have, that can't be taken away from you. The connections, the people you make when you're in a university setting, a lot of times you're in class, your classmates create businesses, go to places, they get in these positions. You know, if you're an entrepreneur and you're in an MBA program, you might be sit next to a kid that's going to become head of a bank or head of a venture capitalist fund. So having those relationships is important too. So you kind of got to balance, like, is it worth the dollar value that I'm going to put in, or could I get this educate? You could probably find most of the information through your own research and studies on the internet, but you're still going to lack the connection with the professors, the connections with the students, and the team and innovation that happens when you have an innovation of ideas put together in one place. So it's definitely unique to everybody's situation, but some industries, it's like a pay to play game. And if you don't have the pedigree, you're not going to be successful. Others, nobody gives a shit. So.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And, you know, what I like about that is that, you know, it depends what career path that you're on, you know, and I think that sometimes people forget that, hey, I've got to go and get this and I've got to get why, you know, take it a step back, guys, and ask the question. Listen to what Nate's saying to you there, you know, the framing carpenter that's come through and he's getting on and whatever it would be. So, yeah, it's just interesting because we're in such, unprecedented times, Nate, aren't we? Economically at the moment with what's happening around the world. And we don't know what it's going to look like coming out. And, you know, I've always found, and this is my personal opinion, and I agree with Nate, I'm not saying that it's right, wrong, or indifferent. It's totally unique to the circumstances. But what I found is that when we look to recruit people, and when I have recruited people both in public limited companies, you know, the floater companies, as well as privately owned companies, what I also look for, it's that culture fit, it's that value, but have they got that motivation? Are they interested and whatever? So, you know, if you are a framing carpenter and you don't maybe have a budget to do that, or you don't think that's you, you know, hard work, building those networks, delivering, over-delivering, doing a good job is going to help you rise through that ranks anyway. But like you say, there are certain jobs that it's just thing. But here's an interesting story. I saw end of last year, quarter four 2019, that like the global major auditors, people like KPMG, they're dropping their graduate program, meaning now you don't no longer need to have a university degree to get into their sort of program, because they're looking for that more motivational, maybe aggressive is the wrong word, but that, you know, gumption upstairs. I want it, I'm motivated for it, than maybe the more reserved individual with a degree. So I found that really, really interesting. And, you know, maybe that's going to change at audit level, at bank level in future. But hey, as it stands, you know, education, and it never stops. Keep learning, keep listening to podcasts, keep reading your books, keep doing your study courses, and, move it forward. But for sure. So thanks for sharing that, Nate. I appreciate your input and insights because, you know, it's always good to get that somebody's perspective who's been through it, as opposed to the people who haven't been through it, who dismiss it. And, I'm not in any position to call out people like Gary Vee or anything like that. I'm going to get an army of people, against me for that, but so I'm not doing that. But somebody like Gary, he's not been through that, and he's saying why you shouldn't do that and why you should just do this and whatever. And if that's his belief, I support that, and, that's it. But for me, you follow your own path. And
I would add to like what maybe an argument to Gary Vee, or maybe it complements his argument, is if you're using I can't do something because I don't have my MBA, then you're using it as a crutch to hold you back. Yeah. So like to say like I have to have a certain thing to happen before I can go try to do something, that's not a true statement. Like you can go find a way to earn money, create a business without all these things. But there's some instances where if you want to go down this path, like you have to, if you want to be a doctor, you can't go to school. But just because you don't have your degree doesn't mean you can't go start something up.
No, absolutely. Great point. Well made. So let's talk a little bit more about networking and the power of personal relationships and some of those experiences. So for the audience, Nate, when you're building personal relationships, What do you think the number one thing is that you've learned about developing this as what I'd call a life essential skill? Because like I say, I opened the show right at the top by, the values in your network, not in your skill sometimes. And ultimately, I just love, for people maybe getting out, maybe the network's not that big. They're good at what they do, but they're maybe struggling to reach out. What do you think is the number one thing that they should do to really start building these personal relationships?
The first thing I would say is to start. Like anything else, it takes time to build up. You don't make friends overnight. I mean, you can buy followers on Instagram, but that's not going to get you anywhere. You want true, real connections, real value, with the intent that these people are somebody you're going to want to go meet and have coffee in real life at some point in time. So I say, 1, get started. And 2, stop making it about yourself and make it about the other people. It's what value can you bring to that person? You're trying to build trust. You're trying to build engagement. And if you want to get people to start building trust in you, you want them to get them talking and have a conversation. So you start with them. Like, what are their interests and stuff? Not just what business line are you in? What do you do? But like, who are your kids? Where'd you grow up? Like, what are your interests? What are your hobbies? And you try to find something that you have a relatable experience with that you can bond over. So like if you cheer for the same sports team, or you both like scuba diving, all of a sudden you have this thing that you can connect with. And then like, oh, by the way, you do business. Yeah, come on over. Let's talk about that. And hopefully I can get you introduced or plugged into their system. So some of that is really finding out what those other people are about, but also being vulnerable and relatable yourself. So when I started posting more vulnerable stuff on social media and LinkedIn, I started talking about personal struggles, or I started talking about interests I have. They're outside of this business line. All of a sudden, people I thought I had no connection with at all, other than like, oh, this guy's a sales guy. He's going to try to sell me something. I got to avoid him. He messages me and says, hey, I saw your post about this, and I'm dealing with the same thing, or I've dealt with it in the past. I'm like, you did? Really? Like, tell me more. And then all of a sudden, when I'm having this conversation, I'm like, oh, let's see what I can do. Like, I know you're in this line of business. Maybe I can help connect you to this other guy. So when the relationship becomes very personable, then it's more important. So I always, everybody's heard this before. People do business with people that they like, that they're friends with. Like, that's really what building networks and friendships is. It's not collecting cards and trying to sell your story and pitch your pitch. It's like, hey, make a relationship and offer that person value. And not everybody is a fit, but if you have that same intention with everybody, I'm going to give them more than they're going to give me, then boom, something's going to take off. And you never know who that person's going to be, who's going to be the real rainmaker in your life. So if you treat everybody with that same level of respect and enthusiasm, it's going to pay off in dividends for sure.
Yeah, absolutely. And the thing is, I've had this numerous times over my career where people have actually not done business with me, but then I get a referral from them. And, I know a lot of the marketers say, hey, warm them up, convert them to customers and build them through ascension or advocacy programs so you get referrals. But imagine getting referrals from people who said, well, look, Mike wasn't for me, or Nate wasn't for me for whatever reason. But hey, what this guy stands for, or this girl stands for, whatever, you could do a lot worse than reaching out to them and shaking that out. So I always see that getting a referral for somebody you haven't done business with is sometimes far more valuable than getting a referral for something you've actually delivered a result for, because, it's like, wow, what does that stand for? And I think that what I've always tried to do when I'm reaching out and helping and connecting and passing on the good vibes and help, and whether that's altruism or whatever one of you want to call it. I love what you say there, Nate, about well, you never know who that person might be. There may be a rainmaker who may not put $1 in your pocket today, but they may put $1 million in it indirectly through a referral, a recommendation, or whatever. So
exactly,
I love that point, and that really, really is solid advice. So we talk about building relationships. We're all on lockdown to a degree, remote anyway. And I make a light joke out of it, just not because of the severity of the situation, guys. I make it just for a little bit of, relief from seeing what the newsreels look like all the time. But making digital connections today. Obviously we're working on Zoom now. There's people use various GoToWebinars or whatever that be. But what is the strategy if we're totally digital? So maybe we're not in construction that is hand to hand or face to face or whatever. We're in the 21st century after all, a fifth of the way through that, by the way, or almost a fifth of the way through that. Is there a specific strategy that you would say to build that digital connection. So you don't just amass a load of connections, but you amass things that something that are either workable or, meets your goals. Is there a strategy around that, Nate, you could share with the audience?
Yeah, I would say this when this all passes and the pandemic's passed and we go back to business and we go back to life, it's not going to be business as usual. There's definitely going to be a massive shift in the way people connect and interact with each other. Like if you want to go buy a webcam right now, you can't find one. They are sold out everywhere. You're going to pay 5 times as much for one as you. So to me, that's a sign that this way of connecting digitally via Zoom and stuff is getting a mass adoption very quickly, and people that would have stayed away from it aren't. So then you say, okay, what does that mean? I don't know what it means exactly, but I know that people are still going to crave human connections, human interactions, whether it's digitally. So think about what you're doing in a, say prior, where you do something in person, and just how does that translate to digitally? So if you're in this instance right now and you're sitting at home going, gosh, I got nothing going on, I just got to wait for life to go back to normal so that I can be back in business. Well, think about what it is in your industry and what you could do digitally. So if you're used to going to network and trade shows and industry mixers, like why don't you host a digital networking mixer, like a happy hour? Like why don't you grab it on a Tuesday and get a couple of beers and with the boys and just have a meeting and chit chat about stuff, and then you're connected with people maybe on LinkedIn, invite 2 or 3 people, hey, we're having this little thing. Now instead of it's just this little group of people that are within your immediate circle of influence or live in your town, maybe I'm having somebody from where you live and another person from Australia and another person from Canada, and all of a sudden you're having these global happy hours and stuff like that. And then there's people that I think offer a service. I think there's going to be a huge opportunity for people in this space that are doing stuff like boutique gyms and classes where they had like a studio and they taught 10 to 12 people in class in person. It's like, geez, just Zoom, put a camera up, record it. Now you could have 100, 150 people in-person members and thousands of people outside of members for doing exactly what you're doing now. You just added a camera and a little bit of investment, and you're going to double, triple your income very conservatively. I mean, it's not going to happen overnight, but a little bit of effort and promotion online and build a following, you're going to be able to double, triple your income just doing exactly what you're doing now before. So I think it's looking for those opportunities of what was I doing in real life and how can I translate that into using Zoom and digital network and digital connections to try to just, make that thing. It's not about collecting followers, but really making a connection with somebody, whatever social media platform it is, and then try to get a connection with them, more personal conversation about what they're doing, who they're doing, how can I help them, and then just go with what you're already doing, but just online.
Yeah, absolutely. And I remember that even before this pandemic started, there's a fitness type. You mentioned the fitness sort of classes. There's a fitness boot camp where they do kettlebells and things like that. And they did that a couple of years ago, and they started to get a little bit of traction with it. And they went down in the summer into a park, put the mats down, and got the cameras out there, and they did that in a great backdrop setting. So it was slightly different because it wasn't in a typical studio with mirrors behind or anything. It was in like not a stately home, but like a country park with some buildings. And it was like a unique setting, and then it started to build in that Facebook community, and they were like Kettlebell Kings or something. I don't exactly know what the thing, so I don't know what you'll find if you search that on Facebook, but it was something similar to that. And they were, to a degree, may not be being laughed at or scorned at, but it was unique at the time what they were doing, certainly here in the UK. But what they say there is look how that now could work for you. And as an entrepreneur, I always look for what I call the Moneyball statements as well. And it's not all just about money, but it's health, success, lifestyle, health, etc., etc. But you could double or triple your income by leveraging it, and having instead of charging whatever you charge at the door, given a live stream or a recording of that and join in, and then get a community, and then maybe that person will come to the studio if they're local to you at a later date. Or I know a lot of people are introducing merchandising lines at the moment. So whatever that community is has a merch line behind it to drive that, and then people are wearing your T-shirt or your hoodie or whatever.
Yeah, I think it's really about finding who you are and just finding more people who connect with you and your tribe. And it's there's going to be more opportunity because people are going to be more comfortable connecting in a Zoom meeting on a digital connection platform, not just like, hey, we're trading stories on Facebook or Instagram, but really having a conversation and a business service. So you're going to expand your reach, and you're going to be able to find more people who like you and who like your niche and what you offer.
No, absolutely. So let's say we go back face to face, Nate, and, you know, prior to lockdowns and things like that, getting the most out of networking events, you know, the traditional ones. I mean, there's things from BNI to construction clubs to, you know, happy hour get-togethers, meets. Is there like a strategy to get the best out of that investment of time? Because, you know, you do see a lot of people who, I mean, you know, it's not about being rude to anybody, but I just see them as serial coffee drinkers. Some of them, they go to every single networking event. They don't really engage. They don't really follow up. And I don't know really why they do that. And I'm sure that they can't be getting a return on investment either out of the time, never mind financially. But you know, that's just my view, and I could be totally wrong, and I'm happy to be shot down on that. But do you see that if you are prepared to go out to build this, you know, networking, have that face-to-face content, or, you know, for the long game, is there a strategy that you can use or some tips that you can use to get the best possible return from the time that you're going to invest? Because you could be doing something else instead of doing that, and, you know, ultimately, you know, the financial cost it takes you to attend.
Yeah. So first, you have to go into the mindset that this isn't an overnight thing that can happen. You have to realize that you're going to want to put in consistent effort and show up at the right places over time, or it's not going to work. So that's the first thing you want to do. And then you want to look at and see where do I want to be? Where are going to be the more likely opportunities for success? Because I'm a believer, if you put yourself in positions more likely for success to occur, then your chances are going to improve. So for example, if you want to lose weight and you're hanging out at the donut shop, the chances of you finding success of losing weight are going to be lower than if you go hang out at the gym. Now, if you go hang out at the gym, you might not get in shape either, but your chances are higher. So start going to places where the opportunity for success is going to be higher. So if you have a niche you want to be in, or an industry focus you want to be in, start looking, hey, where are the people that I want to do business with? Where did they hang out? Once you find out where they hang out, then start going to those things. And the more you go, the more chances are you're going to meet the person that's going to be the rainmaker, not maybe directly, but indirectly, and it's going to get you connected to other people. And then you'll start getting connected. So once you kind of find it, hey, I want to do this, I'm going to put in the time. I know it's not a one-day thing. It's probably a couple-year investment. Start hanging out in these places. Now you go, okay, I'm going to go to a networking event. Everybody's nervous going to a networking event. Nobody, you know, they always get this anxiety. I got to go meet people. I got to go talk to people. But if you go in the mindset like, hey, everybody's nervous, but they're all there for the same point. They're there to meet people. So they're not going to be weirded out if you go and chat with them. So they're there to meet people. So instead of being that person that's nervous, realize everybody else is there is nervous and they're waiting for somebody to come up and say hi to them. So if they're nervous and you're nervous, just be that person and go say, hi, I'm so-and-so. I do this. What do you do? Get them talking. And then you go, well, what if they start talking and the conversation gets old? So I always say, try to find somebody else right away that like you can connect them to. So if I said, hey, Mike, how are you doing? And you're like, hey, I'm doing good. I run a podcast. Somebody else walks by. Hey, Jan, do you know Mike? Mike runs a podcast. It's really cool. And then it got you talking about this. You're talking to that. And then all of a sudden somebody else in the room looks over and go, hey, those three people, they look like they're having a good time. They must know what they're doing. They must be the life of the party. I want to know what they're up to. So then
you become a magnet is what you're saying there. It's an epicenter.
Yeah. So you're just kind of creating this energy around it. And then at the end of the day, if you go in there going, hey, if I go to this thing, there's going to be 100 people there. I'm going to meet 100 people. No, you're not. You're going to meet maybe a handful of people. So you really want to go in too with the intention of who are 2 or 3 people that I could get their business card or whatever, their contact information, have a decent 10, 15-minute conversation with them about life and say, hey, let's connect again somewhere else for 15, 20 minutes and see what we can do to help each other create value in your life. Maybe there's a business thing. Maybe you know somebody that they could get connected to, but you're open to whatever that might be. And just so if you go in there and you just be upfront that you're going to talk to some people, that if you walk away with 1 or 2 people that you can follow up with for a non-committal coffee, no expectations, then you've taken a lot of the pressure off of you that you have to like, I went to this thing, I didn't meet enough people, I didn't collect enough cards. Nope, I met my 2 people, I had some good conversations, I had a good time, I'm going to go again. And you repeat this over and over. A lot of times these repeat monthly, the same events repeat monthly. And then all of a sudden you start seeing the same people over and over again. And you're like, oh, these aren't just strangers. These are my friends. Yeah. It's not that big a deal. And then, you just kind of do that and repeat it and repeat it and repeat it. And just over time, it snowballs. And the people, they're really what's going to lift you up and take you places. So,
yeah. And that's a big part of lead generation strategies for a lot of people. And, whether, like I say, it's the more structured BNIs, the more loose private events, ultimately it doesn't matter whatever your palette is. And, we attend networking events, and I usually find that, we have to maybe go through 2 or 3, not because we want a quick win out of it, like say it's a long term, but, sometimes they just don't serve that audience. Maybe it's advertised in one way and then maybe it's push, the strategy changes and it goes another way. That's okay if you need to leave and it's not right for you. But like I say, I think the key message is make sure you get value, you start to talk to these people and really do that. And what that leads into, Nate, really is there a framework? I know you touched on it earlier, like, hey, go and speak to somebody, tell them who you are, then get them talking. Could I actually just sort of talk you through? Could you break that strategy down further? So, to get the best value out of it, to build the most positive connections, is there something else, like from a follow-up perspective after the event? I know you said go and get a coffee or do whatever it would be, but is there a story arc or like, intro, tell them, is it a questioning technique that you use? How to be successful? Because I know I can see the listeners here thinking, God, I've got to go to the networking event. Nate's right. I've got to go. I'm nervous. I don't know really what to say. I'll probably fluff my lines. If we were to do a framework or a step-by-step, what would that look like, sort of thing, for you to go through a networking event?
I think what you at the root of it is you're trying to build trust with somebody you're engaging with, and everybody's going to have their unique way of doing it. Yeah. So just think about, like, who are the people in your life that you've made friends with that you respect, and you say, hey, that person really is a really caring person. They're an open soul. Like, everybody always flocks to them. Why do people like that person? And it usually has something to do with they find a way to make the other person feel super, super important. So when you kind of have that in my mindset. So one of my close friends, she does numerology, and she uses that as her advantage and her tool. And she's not like all this like, ooh, hippie crystals and like wacky, weird hippie stuff. She's just like, oh, I do this little thing. And she kind of comes off as this like a little parlor trick. Yeah. And so she's doing it, and she goes, okay. And she's asking you a lot of questions about yourself and what she's doing. She's getting you talking about yourself. And then she starts telling you, like, okay, here's what your numbers are. Here's what it means. And she tells you things about yourself that you see, like, oh, I can't believe, like, this person gets me. They understand that this person that has it. So you don't have to have a numerology. You don't have to have a parlor trick, but it's really about identifying with that person and trying to get them, like, so you, like, they think, this person really understands, relates to me. So for me, a lot of times I don't know, like, how to introduce somebody, like, or get introduced or something, like, where it's like, it just feels like it flows in. So it's like, okay, well, if I can't just kind of like, smoothly introduce myself to somebody, why not be a bit more bold and outrageous? So I try to find somebody says, like, they're wearing a nice watch, or they have really nice shoes on, or they have an interesting hat. You go, they wore that for a reason, because they found that it's a part of them that's expressing themselves. So I'll say something like, hey, I really like your shoes, or that's a really cool watch. So then it's maybe not like, hi, I'm Nate, nice to meet you, and what do you do for a living? It's just like, that's like the coolest hat. Where'd you get that? Then they're like, oh, you like my hat? And then all of a sudden you have this conversation. So it's really about getting that other person to start talking about themselves first, and getting them to drop their guards. And it works both ways. So when they start lowering down their guards, you start lowering yours. The connections seem to happen a little bit faster. So just try to be more open, more upfront and honest about yourself, and authentic, and not so much about, I got to ask this person for a business lead, or I got to ask this person for a sale, or I got to pitch this. Just make a personal connection and then take it from there. And not everybody's going to go, hey, let's go grab that coffee. You'll kind of know. You can tell when the conversation is going good and there's a reason why you want to connect. And some of these people, you might even find out, like, they might be your best friend for life. You might never do business with each other ever in your world, but you're just like, oh my God, we're like long lost brothers from another mother. So.
Yeah, and it's like, isn't it, when you sit on an aeroplane and you sit next to this person and you know, where are you from? And you know, they'll say, hey, I'm from California. Hey, I'm from California. And then suddenly, you know, you've never met this person ever in your life, have you? But then suddenly you start talking, which school do you want to, or where do you hang out? And I understand California is a great big place, but ultimately it's that association of relevance. What do they say? Well, it's the hat. It doesn't, you know, whatever. And I think that ultimately people want to do that. And I think the biggest thing I've taken out of this, Nate, really is that a networking event, it's really a people connection event, and then business will follow. So, you know, if you got a truck and a caravan behind it or a trailer behind it, the trailer really doesn't do anything. It just follows where the truck takes it or tows it. And so if you get the people part of that right, the business relationships will materialize out of that and follow on. So, you know, and I think there's plenty of people using this at the moment, but, you know, B2B, B2C, but people talk H to H, the human to human thing. But it doesn't matter how big the corporation is, Apple, IBM, you know, American Airlines, it's still people who buy products. It's still people who make decisions. You know, I've never known a company ever make a decision to buy a product or a service or you know, it's always a person within that organization who does that. So that's that personal connection. If you can build that, then obviously you're in a great position to grow as a person, learn from them, as well as develop your business. So
exactly,
that's awesome. So as we sort of wrap out of the back end of this, Nate, and I love the conversation so far. It's fantastic. And tell me, you know, finding your voice, you had to find that voice, and I know, and then being authentic. That's so important, isn't it? You know, you don't pretend to be somebody else.
Yeah. So when you're finding your voice, like, everybody has a unique personality and everybody has a way of how they go about themselves doing it. Like when I said earlier in the story, like, you know, I came up through this way of like, you called up subs and you yelled at them and you slammed the phone down and you try to get people to do what you wanted through fear and intimidation. I was like, it didn't work for me. So if I tried to adopt that persona, it wouldn't work for me. Like it might work for somebody else. And I felt like I led more through building a team, having partnerships, having relationships and people I could trust and do business with. And that if I was in a pinch, I knew I could call them in a jam and say, hey, I need you out here to do this for me. They would show up. So it's experimenting. You don't find it overnight. You just kind of go, hey, I'm going to put myself out there. I'm going to constantly just instead of sitting on the sidelines, I'm going to take one foot forward, and it's going to evolve. It's going to develop, and you're going to learn along the way, like what works for you and what doesn't work for you. And you're going to get better, and you'll probably make a bunch of mistakes along the way. But you'll learn from them. And that's how we get better at doing things is practice, repetition, and making mistakes and learning from those mistakes.
Yeah. And what I like about the authenticity is when I started doing the podcast, as I say, we speak to people. I spoke to a lady in East Perth in Western Australia this morning. You know, now I'm speaking to somebody in California, and then, you know, I'm just speaking to somebody in Kentucky later today. And, you know, and you have these conversations, and they're all different cultures. Some are expats, some are, you know, natives. And what I always try to do, and, you know, I'm just trying to share my experiences here, is I used to go into the podcast and think, okay, what do I need to be on this podcast? And, you know, maybe I think that's why the first 10 episodes are so sucked, because, you know, the format weren't right, the frame weren't right, and maybe I tried to adjust it too much. And then I thought, you know what, I'm always should be me. And, you know, I can pick up and I can have a diverse range of conversations with my experience of my career. And I think that once I accepted, well, being me, that's just how I am. I ask questions. Sometimes I answer the questions that I ask and then do that, but that's what I do. And that's why I keep going. And I'm not trying to be the next person who's successful on social media or something. I'm just carving out my own thing. And I think that's so important. And I think today people see it too often, don't they, when people are trying to replicate and be like a certain individual. I think the audience is a savvy to that now. Oh, he's trying to be, you know, Tony Robbins, or he's trying to be, you know, whatever he would be, you know, a Grant Cardone type character. And I think just be yourself. You know, find out what it is. Find out why did you start doing what you're doing, and have those dialect conversations. And I think that's how I do it. And if people like it, they stick around. And if they don't, they tune out or unsubscribe. But I can't do much about that, But as a public service, that's what I'm trying to do. And so that's the biggest piece of advice I've given.
Everybody has their own niche of unique characteristics that make them who they are. And it's that passion. When that passion comes through, you're able to tell your story. And kind of relatable to that, it was like a lot of people in my industry are selling stuff that there's nothing to be excited about. Like they sell doors. Like it's a door, like what's so great about your door? And there's stuff that they'll tell you, their marketing propaganda about why it's so much better. But and the reality is, if you get them talking about something that they're passionate about, like, oh, geez, all of a sudden there's this excitement about what they're passionate about. Like, I like you. Like, tell me about your doors. Okay, the doors are cool. Let's do some business. So it's their unique interests and what they're selling and what they're doing that all kind of makes them unique in themselves. So it's that voice. It's like, hey, be yourself, and just find out, what it is that brings you passion and energy, and talk about that and incorporate that into it. And that'll transfer over to the other topics that you want to cover. You'll have your own unique take on it. And you're just not like reading, here's the last Tony Robbins clip and here's my take on it. Like it's more unique when it's from within.
Yeah, absolutely. Nate, it's been an absolute pleasure talking to you today.
Oh, this has been awesome. The hour's flown by.
No, absolutely. It's been amazing. And, especially in today's society, as I say, if you're listening in a historical article, obviously I'm catapulting us into the future. So if you're listening back, this show recorded is around April 2020. You were in the middle of probably the biggest pandemic the world's ever seen with the coronavirus. And whilst I don't want to finish on a negative on that, and there's thoughts and prayers naturally go out to the people suffering and affected by that, but relationships, building relationships, networking, the power. Like Nate says, whether you're online, you're doing it through Zoom, you're doing it through Facebook, you put in a camera up somewhere and get in a community. We're human beings after the end of the day. We've survived for thousands and thousands of years. And that's done because of the stories. That's done because of the connections. That's done because of the friendships. That's because of the relationships. And now more than ever, we need that. So what I want you to do, guys, and tag Nate in, tag myself in when you listen back to this, go and say hello to somebody that you've met. Go and reach out to somebody, go and offer to help them, and just see what reaction you get. Let's see if we can get this movement going. Let's tag Nate in. Let's give him a big thank you. We really appreciate you being on the show today, Nate. And as we sort of wrap out, if you were speaking to somebody who's saying, right, I've got to get this networking right, what would be 3 pro tips that you'd boil down, that the absolute essentials you have to do to at least start and be successful? What would you think those 3 tips would look like?
The first tip would be is you want to start now. You want to do it now because it takes time to develop. So if you're new in your career, a lot of times we postpone it because we don't think it's important. But anybody that's been doing it for a while always goes, I wish I had started doing it sooner. So put in the effort and start doing it now. And it's not a game. It's not a win-lose. So this is pro tip number 2 is go with the idea of, hey, it's an ongoing process. There's always this excitement of who you're going to meet and where those connections are going to take you. So be open to who you meet. Realize that not everybody's a business transaction, that everybody's a human, and just see where it goes. And then 3, I think is along the way, you're going to find your voice, but just realize you don't have to have it all together to go start doing this. Just be yourself. People want to do business because they like you, because you're quirky, because you say the wrong things sometimes, and you spill your drink on yourself. Like those things everybody gets so worried about that they're going to embarrass themselves. Those are the things that people find quirky and unique and make you. So just embrace it and roll with it. So I think those would be my 3 things.
And they're awesome. I couldn't agree more. Thanks ever so much for being on the show, Nate. It's been an absolute honor to be on the show. And if you want to check out Nate, and first and foremost, let's practice what we preach. If you head over to LinkedIn, go to linkedin.com/IN, Nate Peo, NATEPEO. Tell him you picked him up on the Open Mic podcast and give him a shout out and connect with him. Obviously, head over to the website, natepeo.com. Also, go give the podcast a listen. I notice there's Nate's just interviewed Ole Oleg Lockheed. That is one hell of a story. I was fortunate to speak with Oleg in late 2019 or mid 2019, and he's a story there. And out of adversity, and as I say, we're in a bit of adversity at the moment. So go give that All-in-One podcast a check out. Sorry, All-in podcast a check out in the stores. Go give it a rate. Go give it a review. Go give Nate a thumbs up, and let us know how you go with it. Thanks again, Nate. It's been an absolute pleasure.
Thank you, Mike. I've been having a blast.
Awesome. And as always, we appreciate you've got a lot of choice in the podcast market. Thanks for tuning in, lending us your ears. As always, continue your growth engine development. Go do the hustle. Go make it happen. And we're going to continue and pick up with you on another Open Mic podcast show real soon. Stay safe, guys. Take care.
You have been listening to The Open Mic, brought to you by The Success Hub. To find out more and to get the resources we have mentioned in this podcast episode, simply visit blog.thesuccesshub.io and view the podcast section. Thanks for listening, and we look forward to catching up with you in our next episode. This podcast and associated materials is published under copyright to The Success Hub. All rights reserved. No reproduction of this material is permitted.